All right, well, let's get started. I see a bunch of people starting to log on, so I don't want to keep them waiting. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Really excited about this seminar. We definitely saw a lot of interest in the number of registrants we had. Looking forward to real estate data in general in the academic market, but I know there's definitely a demand for rental data. So I'm really excited to introduce John from RentHub. So John's the founder of RentHub. We've been partnering now for, I don't know, almost maybe a year, and I've really enjoyed working with him and his team. I know they have some incredible data, which we're going to dive into really quickly here. And then he has Liz Hong, who's joining us, who is actually a researcher who's used some of the data, or is currently using some of the data, I should say. I'll let her kind of go into the nitty gritty of what she's doing and talk about some of her research. And so I won't tease it too much, but we will go ahead and dive in. So before we jump to John, I just want to do a quick housekeeping. This seminar, as always, is going to be recorded. So if you have to dip out early, or maybe you wanted to revisit something, we'll be sending it to everyone who's RSVP'd to this webinar, so you don't have to frantically take notes. And then the last thing I'll ask to really make these special, we love when we have participation from the attendees. And so there is a Q&A feature built into Zoom. I think you can just type in your questions. I definitely encourage you to do that. It's actually best if you do it while the question is top of mind, because I'll interrupt these presenters and kind of jump in so that the questions are topical to the topic or the slides that we're on. And then, of course, if there's any left over at the end, we'll save some time to answer those questions. But that really makes this more participatory and just honestly more enjoyable. So definitely feel free to chime in. This is a good opportunity to interface with John to get some answers on their data. So with that, John, take it away. I'm excited to dive in and learn more about you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me and us. And I look forward to sharing more about RentHub here. So I founded RentHub a long time ago, but before RentHub, I was trained as an attorney, had a brief stint in a law career, and then I transitioned into real estate at a really interesting time. I transitioned there around 2008 during the GFC, and the market was changing. And since then, rental markets have changed and evolved dramatically. So we're seeing a lot of institutional entrance and capital flow into the industry. And just culturally as a nation, we've moved into more of a renter nation as opposed to the home ownership nation. And now home ownership is super pricey, and that's a time of the moment. But culturally, renting is pretty much accepted as a way of life. We have all these renter subclasses. So we have single family for rent, which is a burgeoning little subsector of the industry. We have co-living, we have short-term rentals. And mainly the industry has gone from offline to online. So nearly all marketing for the rental or the apartment industry is online right now. But what I noticed through my career was that despite the fact that the industry itself has changed, the way we track, measure, and analyze it has not changed. And one of the reasons why is that tracking this industry is really difficult. It's hard. And the main reason is that there's not some large central repository for rental data. This can be contrasted with for sale real estate. So for example, when you buy and sell your home, it must be recorded somewhere publicly on the municipal level by law. This dynamic doesn't exist for rentals. And so therefore rentals are all private contracts between landlord and tenant. And so it makes it really difficult to track and find these contracts. Additionally, adding to that, there's a ton of fragmentation among how rental housing is owned. So you have institutional owners, but you have this huge long tail of mom and pops. Then you have a lot of different formats, all these different systems and silos, and it's become this really big problem. And so that's why we created RentHub. At RentHub, our key insight is that the internet is this common thread amongst all rental housing. And as I said, the industry has moved online. And so at RentHub, we're using alternative data techniques such as web scraping to stitch the entire rental housing market together in a single format. So our platform is just constantly churning and aggregating data points from the public web all the time. So on a given week, we'll see about 1 million listings come into our platform. And like I said, I've been running RentHub in some capacity for a little bit of time. So our data set goes all the way back into 2014. So we have a decade worth of data. And on a daily basis, we're tracking apartment complexes as an example. And we're tracking nearly 500,000 of these apartment complexes with all the units within them on a daily basis. And this is a messy data set inherently. I guess lots of data sets can be described as messy, but because these are user generated, these are listings, they're messy. And we've done a lot of work to go from these messy listings to a data as a service product that we can ship and package directly to you. We're not just giving users a trove of messy listings. One thing that I wanted to add to the previous, just some attributes of the data set. It's national from geographic scoping, and the entire set is refreshed on a biweekly basis. So we have a bunch of data that we're collecting on a daily basis, but the entire set is refreshed every 2 weeks. And to that point of the messiness, we then converting this to a data as a service product. We include a number of fields to help with key things that people might be concerned with the data set. So deduplication is always an issue. And sometimes folks want to track the listing journey along the way to seeing when a listing was posted and seeing when it was taken off the market. A way of getting the days on market, for example, which is a key insight of the rental market. So we include fields to facilitate this. For example, we include a unique property identifier. The same thing for the unit level, but basically this just attaches a unique identifier to a physical place. And therefore you can track all the listings across all the different channels that attach to that physical place. We're also tracking marketing descriptions, which I'll dive into in the next slide. There's key dates. So for example, the date that the unit was posted and the date that we actually scraped it. And that's the way of people understanding when it was taken off the market as well. Address, latitude, longitude, building type, beds, bath, of course. Those are the kinds of things that we're tracking and that we give. And our data dictionary will do a good job of describing some of these key fields that we include. And this slide is really attacking some of the marketing descriptions. If you think about a listing, and again, listings are the atom listing observation. It's the smallest unit of our data set. They include attributes about the property, but they also include marketing descriptions to tell you what's inside of the unit or what's outside of it as well. We're mining this as well. We'll typically give this in natural language so that users can do their own parsing. And we'll also parse ourselves to indicate whether a unit has an upgraded kitchen or granite stainless package, et cetera. I give an example here. Users can use this type of information to determine the different rental rate premiums for amenities across different countries. So in our example, we have the Rogers Park neighborhood, which has an uptick of stainless and granite, and that means a lot of rehabs have been going on in that specific area. You guys might ask, where does this data come from? Well, there's three primary categories. The first are from operator and owner websites. So mycommunityapartments.com, for example, as a generic example. We also are extracting data from internet listing sites. These are sites such as Zillow's and Trulia's and apartments and whatnot.com. That's the largest classification of data sourcing. And then lastly, we have classified ads and other alternative data categories that don't really fit into the above two. But in general, think of RentHub as a single cohesive layer over all sources and channels and all these fragmented pockets across the internet. They all come into our system across 100 different sources on the web. One thing to point out with web scraping, we're very careful to adhere to the latest legal environment that's going on. So we're only extracting factual information from these listings. So we're very careful not to take things like pictures that might be deemed in the possession of these public websites. And I keep keying on the word public. So we're not going behind any type of login wall to extract any private data points. So from here, I will pass the baton to Lizhong so you can see our data in action.
Hey, John, I'm going to chime in with one question that came up while your slides was up. I think you mentioned the historical coverage, and one question came through about, is it always just a snapshot of active listings, or do you have historical listings with the posted date? And I think you mentioned kind of the how long the data was listed. So I imagine you do kind of update the historical listings after it's come off market as well.
Yeah, correct. I mean, so again, the same kind of web crawling activity in the same data set has been in effect, again, for over 10 years. So yes, and with the property ID, you can see a specific physical place and see how that listing or is attached to that physical place over time. So it's not just only that snapshot. We also try to say, hey, for this physical place, you've seen this listing this year, that year, et cetera.
Great. Thank you.
All right. And do I stop share? Is that the best, or does she just take over?
If you have separate slides,
Ah,
you can stop sharing and then we can switch
cool.
the presenter.
There we go.
Thank you. Great. So hi everyone, my name is Lizhong Liu. Thank you, John, very much for the great introduction of the data. And today I'm excited to share just a little bit of my research using the RentHub data. Actually, I want to emphasize that this research will not be possible if I don't have like RentHub granular and high frequency data, but we'll see how it is shortly. So I'll start with a brief introduction of the research question and then talk about the data and also the method, and importantly, what information from the RentHub data that we use and how we process it. And then I'll present some of the findings, and then finally provide a brief conclusion. So this study is funded by the Caston Multifamily Forecast at the Lusk Center of USC. It's a white paper prepared for this 2023 Caston Multifamily Forecast Conference. And so today I will only focus on the results that utilize RentHub data. So if you're interested in the full report, please feel free to go to the Lusk Center website for the full paper. So Southern California actually has a really high density of higher educational institutions. They accommodate over 400 of these universities and colleges, and then at the same time, a large population of students, staff, and faculty on campus. Previous research, especially survey data, show that more than half of the undergrad students live off campus. And we can imagine that, like if we ask graduate students, then a substantially higher share would say they live off campus. So universities are likely to introduce tremendous demands to local rental markets. And at the same time, the students' housing demands is also likely to be different from incumbent residents just because how different they are, and then they're all coming from different places of different age and then different racial and income profiles. So in these studies, we want to understand how the existence of universities could have an effect on local rental housing markets. And we focus on the 6 counties in Southern California. This is in response to the focus of Caston Conference. And the RentHub data gave us a great statistical power to do this analysis. While it mainly shows the equilibrium supply characteristics of the market, but it also, at the same time, at least partly reflect the demand side of this special market segments. So, like I said before, we utilize like the whole research is sort of built up on this RentHub data. And as John demonstrated earlier, RentHub provides really high frequency and granular rental listing data. And then within each listing, we get to observe the geolocation down to the street address and also the asking rent at a specific time point, and then also some of the unit characteristics, such as the size of the unit, number of bedrooms, and also like some amenities that come with it. For example, if there's a gym exists in the property, if there's garage and how many garage there are. And then we also do a little bit of this validation of the RentHub data. So what we did is we spatially joined the listing to the census tract, and then we calculate this tract level median rents so that we can compare with additional data sources. And specifically, we're using the American Community Survey 5 years estimate to make the comparison. So here we plot the RentHub asking rent, which is shown on the y-axis, against the ACS medium asking contract rent on the same scale. So and each point here represent a census tract, and then I plot this 45-degree red line. So you can imagine, ideally, we would want to have all the dots surrounding this red line. So now we see that in general, RentHub asking rent is somewhat higher than the median contract rent as captured by the survey data, which makes perfect sense because especially when you're dealing with like mom and pop landlords, you can imagine that the negotiation process could bring down the actual contract price compared to the regional asking price. So we also use this additional data sources like university data and neighborhood data. We will not go into details, but just put it in the back of our mind. And so the first thing we want to do is to sort of identify or define this university rental housing markets. And we do this by first look at the price gradients by distance from the sample universities. And then we can determine a distance cutoff that kind of portray the spatial extent of each rental universities. And then we can compare the rental universities rental listings near the universities compared to the rentals that are further away, but still somewhat close in geographically measures. So the way that we define this rent gradient is start with drawing a set of concentric rings, which we define as R, surrounding each sample university, each with a 500-meter radius from the inner circle. And then we can calculate the average asking rent in each of this ring near universities. Then we get like a measures by each 500 meters as the asking rents from the universities to further away. And then we compare this set of like average asking rent with the county average rent to see like the difference between, like by distance and then to the overall mean. And then we get this sort of difference, what we call tilde P. And if we visualize it, it looks like this. So on the x-axis, we have the distance to universities measured in kilometers. And then on the y-axis is the difference between each point of the, each P in a ring compared to the county average. So here we shows a very interesting patterns. So we see that, and the patterns is consistent across years. So we see that as we move closer to the universities, we see a huge rent spikes. And but that kind of effects sort of depreciate pretty fast as we move further away. And the cutoff is in about like when you move about 2 to 3 kilometers away from universities, then the rent is almost non-differentiable from the rest of the county. So that's what we define as the university rental markets. And here is an illustration of our study area. So in the pink circle, like the pink circle in the center of the pink circle, so those pins marks the sample universities in our data. And then the pink circles marks a 1.5 kilometers radius from the university, which we define as the university rental markets. And then we move another 1.5 kilometers away from that, which is marked by the blue areas. That's our comparison area. So the 1.5 may seem a little arbitrary at this point, but we also use like different cutoff, like 1 kilometers or 2 kilometers, and whatever comes next, our results are pretty consistent. So we want to first demonstrate that, like near the universities, the rental markets actually demonstrate really distinctive supply characteristics. So the RentHub data allow us to observe all these characteristics, and you can aggregate to whatever spatial aggregate level that you want. And in this case, we're aggregating to like literally this pink circle and then the blue rings. And then what we see is that here, what I did is to standardize each of this measures and then run a regression of regressing this one as an outcome on the dummy indicators, suggesting if the listing is within the pink circle or is within or not. And so what we see is that for those who are inside the pink circle, so in the university rental market, the listings are substantially smaller in terms of footage and the number of bedrooms. And at the same time, it's more dense in terms of if we look at the share of apartment buildings is substantially higher than the those in the blue areas. And it also are substantially more likely to have gyms, more likely to be furnished, and also have a higher asking rent. So we will quantify this difference later. And to make the comparison even more straightforward, I'm here to decompose the supply composition within the pink circle and then compare it, which is the university rental market, and then compare it with the comparison area, which is the blue area that we saw previously in the map, and then also compare to the full sample, which includes all the listings in these 6 counties. So what we see on the left-hand side is that the university rental markets, the listings are substantially more likely to be 0 bedroom, which are studios, and 1 bedrooms. And they're also like 90% of them are actually apartment buildings. If we look at the full sample, only half of the listings are apartment buildings. So this is one of the very standout like characteristics of this supply characteristics near universities, which sort of suggests that, like near universities, if we assume that most of the demand come from faculties or students, and especially students, it seems like they prefer to live in this like more dense area, to live closer to their peers, and also live in a smaller units, which potentially reflect that it's more likely to be like non-couple, like singles of the demand. And finally, we run this regression, which allow us to control for all the previously observed differences in the rental listings, but just to look at how the distance itself, the distance to university itself, affect the asking price. So here on the left-hand side is the asking rent of listing I in a given year near a certain university. And then on the left-hand side, the main independent variable that we have include first an indicator if the listing is within the university rental market or not, which we define as R. And then also we interact this indicator with a inverse distance to the universities. So the reason why we include a distance, inverse distance instead of distance is just for the purpose of more convenient interpretation. And then we control for all the listing level characteristics and neighborhood level characteristics, as well as the year fixed effects and university fixed effects, just to make sure that our comparison is actually made between units that are identical other than the distance to the universities. So this is the regression results. And what we see is that if we look at the second column, which is our preferred specification, we see that just by being in the university rental market, the asking rent is about like $200 more. And based on that, if we move closer, 1 kilometer closer to the universities, we get additional $120 more premium in the asking rent. And we further compare, like stratify the university based on the location, whether the university is in urban areas or in suburban areas. And then we can see that most of the effects that we just observed actually come from like university located in city. Basically, you can think of it as if you have a university, and then or if you want to run a rental business that near universities, then you should choose like in the urban areas, which will give you a higher rent premium. So just to quickly conclude, what we find is a significant relationship between the proximity to universities and the rental asking price. And then this rental market segments demonstrate distinctive characteristics that the rental units are substantially smaller and more dense. And then they also have a substantially higher units that are furnished and have gyms in the properties, which reflect the distinctive demand characteristics of the local markets as well. So in this studies, we mainly utilize the granularity from the RentHub data that's like on geographically granular. But at the same time, we can also imagine using the RentHub data in terms of like the high frequency nature of this data to run other analysis to look at the fluctuation or volatility of price over time. And so that's a whole different topics. I would not go into details, but here I want to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'll pass
Thank
it.
you. Yeah, that was awesome. Appreciate it. It was fascinating to dive into that. Actually, you kind of led to one of my questions I was going to ask. Are you looking to use this data for any other research, or if not actively right now, any ideas of ways that it could be used maybe in different types of studies or different types of topics?
Yeah, so there are several research projects that are currently ongoing where I use the RentHub data. So I'll give you one example, like because I mentioned that you can utilize the high frequency nature of the data as well. So one of the research that I'm currently doing is to understand how the COVID-19 rental assistance program affect the local rental market. And given that COVID-19 happened not that long ago, and then the high like seasonality in terms of the rent itself, then so we actually do need like high frequency data, preferably like on a monthly frequency. And so if based on my knowledge, I don't think there are any other type of rental data like on that high frequency exists other than the RentHub data. So yeah, that's one example, and you can even imagine doing something even higher frequency, like if you are interested in studying how the interest rate, long-term interest rate, or like how inflation reflects in the rental markets, then you can imagine doing like even daily or even weekly analysis using
Nice.
the data.
Yeah. John, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to potential topics, but I'll throw another question at you as well. Or one thing I noticed in a theme I've heard a lot is the challenge of kind of creating a unique identifier for properties, because addresses are just really hard to work with as like a join key, as you probably all know. But you did say you have a unique identifier for properties. What's that been like? How's that process of creating that been like for you? I'm sure it's a challenge.
It's a huge challenge, and Lizhong and I have gone back and forth. Unfortunately, it's not the most precise, but one of the things that we've been working to incorporate is place key from the SafeGraph folks, and so at least that's a ubiquitous identifier across many different data sources and whatnot. So hopefully that's soon to be fully incorporated, but yeah, we've definitely had our own, and within rentals as well, there's the actual property for like a single family or an apartment complex as a whole, but we also have to compensate for units within multifamily or duplexes or whatnot.
Right.
So it's definitely an inherent challenge. And also with rentals, you're dealing with user generated content, so sometimes there's misrepresentations of accuracy from one listing to another. But nevertheless, we do the best we can with this and get the best signals we can.
Yeah, nice. It's cool to hear you're looking at place key. I know on our platform, at least, I think we have 4 or 5 or 6 other partners already kind of incorporating place key into their data sets. And I think for the end user now being able to easily join with that unique identifier that kind of spans multiple products and allowing that SafeGraph team, or I guess the place key team, to really bear the challenge of doing all that joining and the complicated logic there has definitely been helpful. And I think for researchers too, I mean, the place key has a free public API. If you are working with your own data sets that you've created that have some sort of address identifier, you can actually kind of create your own place keys as well. So it's a resource for the users to look at as well. One question that just came through, has the data been integrated with any parcel data? So I guess talking about this idea of joining to different identities, is there any sort of like, join key to parcel data, which have their own kind of form of a join key themselves?
Unfortunately, no, not yet. But that's definitely something we'd be happy to look into. And I think that was Andre. He asked another really intelligent question earlier about the potential to whether our documentation will share the percentage of certain variables that aren't present. And I think I privately responded that we don't, off the shelf give that, but if that's something that he's interested or anyone's interested in understanding better, we can definitely provide that and share, group of listing observations and what percentage and whatnot of each variable is either there or not there.
Yeah. And I'll go ahead and actually add to that on the Dewey platform where the RentHub data is loaded, when you preview the data, we actually go column by column and you can see the kind of the fill rates and the number of rows that have values in each of the attributes. And so it's a good way to preview the data before having to go make that call of, hey, I want to license this, or hey, I want to download it all. And you can see kind of attribute by attribute which data sets are there. And there's free samples too if you want to not only preview the data but actually want to work with maybe 100 rows of the sample. All that's available, and then we're happy to help you kind of license the data as well, obviously. One other question that I always ask this actually for me is John, where do you guys go next? I know you've been at this problem for a while. What are the biggest challenges you're facing, and then what are the kind of maybe features or changes you look forward to making into the product in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating to delve deeper with this market with academics. Love working with this crowd in that folks are very cerebral and understand as well some of the inherent challenges with the data and can incorporate that into their research. I'm excited to see as some of the people that we've sold data to, some of their papers get published and see that flywheel and see more people kind of see how and get their brains around that. So I'm excited to see that. But as the product persists, I think one of the goals is to really nail down that unique identifier, property ID, place key, to really and see how this data can actually get joined with other sets, maybe even things that I'm not seeing at the moment. So that's kind of the next step, is seeing with what other sets of data this rental data set can be combined with to pull out some really, really interesting and intriguing insights. But looking forward to see some of these papers come to life and also spawning some new ideas. So very excited for the potential in this specific market.
Yeah, sounds good. Nice. Well, unless any other questions come through, I think we'll wrap it there. Guys, I really appreciate the time. The presentation was awesome. If any other questions do come through, feel free to reach out to me or John directly, and we'll be sure to answer them. And like I said, you'll get an email from us in the next day or two with this recording, and you can reply directly to that email, and I'll include John on any specific questions there. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. But thank you everyone for your time and joining, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you guys. Cheers. Thanks, Evan. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Take care.